Stardate 47566.7. Welcome back to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a kind of smart, kind of funny podcast about new Star Trek and beyond. I'm your reluctant captain, Mike Garcia. With me on the view screen is
Mariah Gossett.
Clyde Haynes.
And Grant Davis booked a solo trip to Riza this week for a little solo Jamaharon, if you know what I mean. So he'll return next week.
For one.
Grant will be back next week. But this week, we are live streaming the pod on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, covering the second episode of Star Trek Lower Decks called Envoys. And if you watched us last week, you know most of us were digging Lower Decks, the first Star Trek animated series since the 70s, right, Mara? 70s? Yeah. I know Clyde, while Clyde liked it, you're maybe kind of acting like a slightly grumpier old Star Trek fan than the rest of us, but that's okay. That's okay.
Hey, I laughed more this week. I will say that.
All right. We'll jump into what Clyde and the rest of us thought about the episode 2 of Lower Decks in just a sec. Now, I think Mariah has something very pressing to tell us, right, Mariah?
It is very, 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 very important news. You need to subscribe to this podcast. If you have not done so already, you can do that on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. All of the links for where you can find this show for your listening or viewing pleasure is available at StarTrekPod.co.
Nice. And while you're subscribing, if you love this pod, but think, hey, you know what? I want just a little bit more. And I wonder what the crew of the Discovery Pod is up to throughout the week. Then you should check out our Patreon site. Yes. So on our Patreon, you can come and see extra footage. We do a podcast. That's where you can find all the old Treks like TOS and TNG and DS9 and Voyager. And who knows, maybe one day even Enterprise. Probably not going to happen. But it's also where we're doing the Kelvin movie pods. So if you want to be a part of our Patreon to get all of that extra content, you should check it out. And if for $2 an episode, that's $2 an episode, you get to be a part of our Slack channel where you get to talk to, hang out, and learn about all the stuff that's going on with us throughout the week. There's a rowdy bunch that hangs out in the Slack channel. So check out our Patreon. Mike, you want to hit them with the Patreon?
Yeah, patreon.com/Star Trek Pod. And just a reminder to listeners listening to the audio version of the pod today, you can catch our live stream every Thursday at 9 p.m. Central. Just go to StarTrekPod.co, click on that YouTube link, and we'll be live 9 p.m. Thursday. And if you're watching us live tonight, thank you, and please do participate in the live chat. If you have a comment or question you want us to address later during the pod, a little later if we have time, we will get to those comments. Just type the word pod in all caps, capital P-O-D, before your comment. Helps us see it so we can talk about it later. Okay, let's talk Lower Decks. Episode 2 is titled Envoys, written by Chris Kula, directed by Kim Arndt. This is the one where Mariner and Boimler escort a Klingon diplomat to a wacky, wacky planet, and things quickly go sideways. And on the Cerritos, Rutherford has a bit of an identity crisis spurred by an invitation from Tendi. Also, we officially say goodbye, for now, to the Vulcan hello, and welcome into our unofficial Star Trek sexicon, the Jamaharon.
So smexy.
Very. And if you're new here, you're probably familiar with other podcasts giving their hot takes on things, but since this is a Star Trek podcast, we don't give you hot takes.
No, we don't.
Nope.
We give you hot frakes.
Hot frakes!
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
See,
Grant
that's when I
Davis,
miss Grant. Now,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
rest
yeah.
of the pod, I'm good. But right there is when I miss Grant.
All right, who's got a hot frake on episode 2 of Lower Decks?
I can go first. I really enjoyed this episode a lot. I think it is I mean, for me, my number one thing that I love the most is we are on an alien planet again. We're having a lot of fun using animation to get to see a bunch of different, species and alien races and other humanoids that we haven't gotten to see a lot in the Star Trek universe, which is something I love. I also like that this was sort of them guiding you through all of these fun, different references to cultures we've seen in the past, right? So we start out in the Klingon district. We get to see um, just like so many different variances of people and cultures. And it reminds me of any time you actually go to a big, large city, right? So, and in this idealized Federation world, I think it made sense to me that there would be these planets now that have districts that cater to all of these different people that are coming in and out, especially if it is a place where there is, diplomats and things like that going on. If you think about places like Washington, D.C. or New York or San Francisco, any of those other big port political places, you get these incredible different districts that cater to the many populations that call that place home. So I loved it. I thought it was super fun. I thought the A plot and the B plot were super exciting. I think Rutherford's little jaunt into all of the different departments, it was like we got a guided tour through the many faces of Star Trek, right? We got to see all of the departments. We got to see all of the many types of aliens we've seen before in the past and some new ones. So I think it was a really smart episode too, especially for people who maybe had never seen Star Trek before.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
that's true. Clyde, you said you laughed more this week.
Yeah, I think what I noticed about the episode this week was we really got a chance to just laugh. It was kind of making fun of itself. Again, not in a kind of a harsh way, but just as in a hey, look, I know some of the stuff that I do is silly, and it's fun to laugh with that, right? And so stuff like, why does every Klingon name have an apostrophe? That was funny to me. Like I thought that was great, and I think that we're starting to see a couple things established, right? So one, Mariner to me is clearly the star. It seemed early on that it might be Boimler, but it really is Mariner. And every time she says almost anything, I'm riveted. And then we're seeing her leadership ability. She does have this certain kind of Kirkness to her, especially kind of Kelvin Kirk, where she is the most reckless, dangerous person around, but man, does she know what she's doing. And I mean, from the minute that she started yelling blast shields and singing blast shields, like again, I thought that was funny. And I've seen it twice. I saw it on the preview, and I'm going to be honest, I laugh every time. Um, and Mariah, to your point, you've got an A plot and a B plot. I was actually more interested in the B plot with Rutherford and kind of the journey through the ship. And for me, it concluded the way I was hoping, that he would be back to where his home was. And as someone who speaks to a lot of people about careers, we got to see someone who actually is on a starship who's struggling with, well, maybe I should change careers. And we got to see that experience. So I really did enjoy this one. I'm still not quite sure where I put it in the pantheon of Star Trek shows, but I enjoyed this episode quite a bit.
Right on. Yeah, you and I kind of take it from the same perspective. We watch character, right? I agree with everything Mariah said about how smart this episode was in terms of slyly introducing you to the world or the universe or multiverse of Star Trek, because we got so many representations of alien races in this episode, and some of them were actually new to me and maybe new to a lot of other Star Trek fans. And I think one of Mike McMahon's credos in making the show was, this show is going to be inhabited by not just the Star Trek aliens you know and love, but also the ones that have been on the fringes, and maybe some that have only been in the novels or in the animated series that some people who only watch the movies and the show or the live action shows have not seen. So we're definitely seeing that, and it's pretty exciting. And Overall, I had a great time with this episode. The jokes and the references were flying so fast that I'm going to need to watch it 3 more times just to fully appreciate it. And I just watched it a few hours ago. I had a busy day, so I've only seen it once. But I agree with Clyde. Mariner is the MVP again this week. She referred to herself as a super cool person in this ep, and it's just so true. She's Peter Venkman. She's Han Solo. She's bursting with idiosyncrasies, but she's just so brilliant and snarky. But she's also willing to take an L to cheer up her fellow crewmen. So she does have a heart. Like, I love her. Like, and she's Kirk, right? But cooler. I'm not so much loving Boimler, and I get that he's the foil, and we're seeing an arc with his character, and I'm willing to ride along to see where it goes. But in this episode, he was maybe written like too much as a foil for Mariner. Like, I found him really quickly getting really grating and incompetent, and I stopped caring about him. This is a problem. I stopped caring about him way before Mariner comes around and decides that she's going to do this nice thing for him to build him back up. So that worked more for me as a character beat for Mariner than a salvation of Boimler. So maybe that didn't work. And the subplot with Rutherford and Tendi was really funny. But again, it was cute and twee and sweet like last week, and full of some great jokes and references. I wasn't blown away by this episode, but I had a very pleasant time with this one. And I think when I watch it again, what is really going to stick out to me in a positive way are it's just the mass of like jokes per minute, and just how smartly this show is conveying the world of Star Trek to the new watcher, right? I think they're doing a great job with that.
Yeah, I have to wonder, like, I know it's a very like fan-filled writers room, but then also just like such a comedic heavy writers room as well for this show. It's like I can not in a bad way, but I can like feel the amount of work that has gone into these episodes, because not only are they funny, but they are so layered with Trek references and just like small little quips that, because of how much of a fan Mike McCann is, like they thought about all of those references they were going to make, like to make sure they were staying within canon, because they know they don't want to piss off the fandom. They want them to like this
I think
show.
they do and they don't.
Right. I mean, you know what I mean? But it's
Yeah.
like
Poke them a little bit, but don't make them angry.
Right. Like they want to respect what is already there, but they want to have fun and bend the rules, but they don't want to break the rules.
Right.
And so it's like all of those small notes about like, oh, we have a treaty with these people. You can't punch him. And like, oh, because I'm a Federation officer, stop punching that old man. Like all of these little things where he cites different rules, I think add to that character of him being such a bookish person, and I think will hopefully help him build a better personality than just being a little bit of an annoying foil to Mariner. But I like the two of them going back and forth.
How are you feeling about Boimler, Clyde? Did he grate on you as much as he did me?
He did a little bit. Like I can handle a little bit of it, but it's I don't like the annoying kind of rule follower, scared all the time, right? Like as much as I love Stargate Atlantis, the Rodney character drives me nuts. Right? I'm like,
Oh, that's weird because he's my favorite.
I mean, it's
I don't see him as a Boimler though, because
no,
Rodney, yeah.
it's
But I hear what you're
different.
saying.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, all right, we've got this one note, and we're gonna hit that note constantly. Rodney's different because Rodney's also super competent. We have not seen that from Boimler yet, and so to me, I'm looking and going, well, what's the payoff? Because right now, he kind of seems like the guy that is the least competent, but might end up as the kind of the captain someday. He's the rule follower, but we haven't really seen the value he brings. And so I'm kind of like, I'm more interested in all the other characters than I am Boimler right now. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Just wait till season 9 when Boimler turns into Picard, and we all sit back and be like, "Ah, the journey was worth it."
Well, here's the real question, though, right? Like right now, most of the interactions that we're getting with Boimler are really buoyed up by Mariner, right?
Hmm.
You remove her from the equation, and if we got a Boimler centric scene, I think it would be a little hard to watch. Like if it was just him on his own, but you can put Mariner in any scene without any of the other characters, and she's interesting. And I'd say the same about Rutherford, at least in this one. I was kind of like, okay, what's going to happen next, and what's going on?
Yeah.
And so that's my issue with Boimler right now. Is he's just not his own character yet.
So there were other things to say other than ragging on Boimler. One of the funniest things in this ep was how everyone on the Cerritos crew kept supporting Rutherford every time he announced a new career change. And every time he quits a career track, it seems like his commanding officer is gonna get like take it personally and get upset. And then like almost pathologically they all support and cheer him on to the extreme. That was funny like on the surface, but it's even like if you don't know anything about Star Trek, that's funny. But it's even funnier when you're a Star Trek fan because it plays like a wink to the supposed no conflict rule
Mm-hmm.
that Gene Roddenberry apparently had on the Enterprise from TNG, or like how Starfleet and the Federation is supposed to be this utopian, ideal place full of super kind, understanding, supportive, community first people. Like no one is gonna get upset if you keep changing careers like a crazy person. It's all good, bro. We're all here to support you. We're the Federation. So I think that's a good way to. That was a great like Mariah. You mentioned like it's great that these jokes are layered. Like that was a good way to construct a running Star Trek gag because it's great on the face of it, but it's even funnier if you get the reference.
Yeah, and it's like there's been so many characters we've seen throughout Trek who have totally switched departments, and it's
Yeah.
never really talked about.
Yep.
I think even the remake of the pilot, I think Sulu wasn't even on the bridge, and then he eventually becomes the main pilot on the bridge, and then
Jordy,
oh,
right?
Geordi, and then from Deep Space Nine, he would like who was on
Comini, Chief O'Brien.
yeah, Chief O'Brien also.
Oh yeah, Chief O'Brien was
Mhm.
in TNG. He was the guy who pushed the button on the transporter,
Mhm.
and then
Well,
all of a sudden he's the chief of engineering on this giant space station next to the wormhole that leads you to the Delta Quadrant. Like what?
and before that, he was a helmsman, right? Like he flew the ship,
Gamma
and then
Quadrant.
he became a transporter technician, and then became like head of ops. And I was reading
Hmm.
something because I was like, I want to know more about this whole kind of phenomena. And I was reading that the idea that someone like Jordy would move from kind of, again, being at the con to looking up and then being chief engineer. Someone said it would kind of be like, you know, Sulu filling in for Scotty. And then I remembered the Kelvin Universe episode, like movies that we just watched, where you had Chekhov, who at one moment is running the con, and the next minute he's thrown into engineering. And it looks like that is the most ridiculous idea ever. There's got to be an assistant engineer that would be a better choice. And yet we see that for the most part, he almost blew up the ship. So I
But
thought
he
that
wore really cool goggles though
Mhm.
he
the whole
did.
time.
So this to me was kind of interesting. It was like an interesting callback when you kind of look at this, and I thought they did a really good job of showing that, like, yeah, he had skills, but in like I loved him being in kind of the med bay where it was like, wow, you've got some transferable skills, but then again, it just wouldn't work. You'd be a disaster in here. That was probably my favorite kind of iteration of
Yeah.
his
That
looking around.
that's a good point, and I'm going to pepper in some of the comments during this conversation. Chupi says, "I thought the real message emerging in this episode is quote everyone is valuable in their own way."
Except Boimler. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just jokes. They're just jokes.
I think we're gonna eventually see his redemption episode, because I
Mm-hmm.
thought we might see it at the end of this one, but I actually like that they gave him a false sense of security at the end of the ep. But
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's coming.
Yeah, and that false sense of security, like I think what Chupi, I'm interpreting what Chupi is saying in terms of Boimler is Mariner thought that.
Hmm.
You know, he was going to leave Starfleet, but she was right. She's been around. She knows stuff. She was right when she said Starfleet needs people like you, because you're the guy who's going to study and know everything, and that's going to come into play in the pinch one of these days. And also, people like you are the backbone of Starfleet and the Federation. So yeah, we need you around, and she recognized that, and so she did what she did at the end to keep him on track, and she found value in him. We're talking
Yeah.
a lot about like careers, like uh, like Rutherford's career hopping. Um, I like that this show is all about the ensigns starting out their careers, and they each have their different career ambitions, but they each express those ambitions in different ways. Like Boimler is just a stickler, and he's going to be captain, but he's really like he has his anxiety about everything because he's never really been in the field, but he still has his target on the command, being a commander. And then we have Tendi, who's just so enthusiastic about everything and seems to have this organic love for any type of adventure that's what fuels her. And of course, you have Rutherford, who is just born to be an engineer and play with this technology that is on a starship. That one day he's probably gonna build the next great starship. So we have all these different things that are driving these people, and it's really great. Like I said last week, it's really it's aspirational. Um, but this is most like the career thing and the way they look at it differently on this show. It's most apparent with Boimler and Mariner. Like Boimler is obsessed with ending up on the bridge, being a commander, doing everything by the book, rising up, just climbing that ladder. He might not have the chops to do it right now, but he's obsessed with it. And his obsession with climbing that ladder, in this episode anyway, in the first episode, kind of makes him like a one-note drag. But Mariner gets it. She's like, this is Star Trek. We're in the Federation. There's no money. Career status doesn't really mean shit. I'll stay an ensign for as long as I want because I can have fun. I can goof off. I can still explore strange new worlds. Like, it
And
feels
4
like
weeks.
she.
Don't
What's
forget
that?
4 weeks shore leave.
4 weeks shore leave.
Well,
Like, I'm in the
that's
sweet spot, baby.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
So,
get 4 weeks shore leave. I'm just
me
saying.
neither. Yeah.
That's
I,
big
I
time.
like the dichotomy between these two characters. Like, uh, what's I think that's what Star Trek and Starfleet is all about. Like, different people
It's a
have
puzzle, right?
have different perspectives of what it can offer and how you can take advantage of it. Like Boimler's like, this is going to shape me and mold me, and I can rise to the top, and Mariner's like, I'm already shaped and molded. I'm good. I'm just gonna lay here in this sweet spot for a while.
But I think some of that comes from the fact that we're looking at Mariner, who's both of her parents are senior officers in Starfleet, right? So, you're almost, in a sense, I mean, I hate to bring him up, but she's Wesley Crusher in a sense, right? Like she's seen it, she's been there. There's a good chance that she probably grew up on a starship. Like she's been through a lot of stuff. So at this
Okay,
point,
that's what you mean. I was gonna say she's cool,
no, yeah,
though.
no. I just mean she's seen a lot of this stuff where somebody who came straight, who's first generation Starfleet, straight out of the academy, all they know is the rule book, right? And it looks like Mariner is somebody who's by the at the same stage of her career, she's seen a lot and kind of knows, all right, here's when you need to bend the rules a little bit versus follow the rule book to the letter of the law. And I think that's what we're seeing in kind of the way her character's being developed.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of almost any job I've ever had, and even like in higher education, like I could definitely tell, like when I was in my master's program, like the kids who went straight from undergrad to grad versus the people who took time to like go into the workforce and figure out what real life was like. And then like doing group assignments, you're like, oh, okay, you've only been in school. You don't know what it's like out there yet, And then,
That is
um,
not gonna work in the real world.
no, and
But
then
but the book says nope, it's not
right.
gonna work though.
Nope. And the same thing, like you can always tell when it's someone's very first job. Like, I probably started working when I was 16, and so in a similar way, Mariner has been on a working starship, I would assume, since childhood, like you were saying, Clyde. And so her life experiences of what sort of life is out in the galaxy is going to be so much different from Boimler, who went from home to the academy to a starship.
Yeah.
And so having I loved the line too when she was like, "Oh yeah, we did some gray ops stuff back in the day," and he's like, "Back in the day, we're the same age." And so she was that like 16-year-old kid who was like sneaking off whenever they docked anywhere to go get into some trouble.
And also, this is Star Trek, so it's not Black Ops, it's Gray
Gray
Ops.
Gray
ops,
ops.
yes. Mhm.
Off-White Ops.
Taupe ops.
There you go.
Chartreuse ops.
I like what JC says in the chat. We need a Commander Mariner shout out in the Picard show.
That'd be great.
Yes, we do, because this is definitely the breakout character.
I would
Star Trek
love
2020.
to see them like on like a view screen, and it's actually like Tawny like on the screen instead of the animated
Oh,
version. Wouldn't that be
yeah.
so cool?
Yeah, or they call her up on the pad or whatever. Yeah, and it's Tawny Newsome. Oh, that would be great.
I would take it even if they brought Tawny Newsome on as a different named character.
You
Like
just want to
even-
see Tawny Newsome.
Well, I mean, I want her to move and act like Mariner, but
Right.
even if they decide not to make it specifically Mariner, maybe from an age thing or whatever.
Oh, right. Should be older. Yeah.
But I would dig that.
Yeah. So I like the twist in this episode, if you could call it a twist. I thought I knew where the Boimler Mariner storyline was going. That I thought she was like, he was doing everything wrong and she's saving the day with her street smarts or her space smarts, whatever you want to call it. But I thought that she was going to eventually get them into a really sticky situation that she couldn't get them out of, and Boimler would use his book smarts and stickler personality to get them out of it. But like, I didn't expect the show to take sides and basically say, nah, Boimler's got a lot of growing up to do and he's getting it all wrong. We side with Mariner. You side with Mariner. She knows what's up. That was a twist for me. That through the whole thing, the perspective was Mariner's right. Did you guys think that was going to happen, or did you think we're going to get like a more traditional, like, oh, they're both right in their own way kind of story?
I don't know. I thought it could kind of go either way. And as soon as the little Ferengi showed up and she's like playing dumb that it's not a Ferengi, and she tried to say it, I looked it up, but like the alien,
Bolivin or something. Bolivin or something like that.
yeah, which are like blue or gray in skin tone. So I was like, yeah. So I was
Bolians,
like
the Bolians.
Bolians, yes.
Oh
And
yeah, at that
so-
point I knew she was letting him have the
Yeah.
win for sure. Yeah.
have the moment. But yeah, I figured there'd be like that moment, and I wasn't sure like which way they were going to play it. I actually kind of just liked that we got to see this full journey for Mariner and just see exactly how smart she is. In the same way, I'm sure we're going to eventually get the redemption for Boimler. We're probably also going to see a point where she does get like captured or something bad happens. And I'm hoping it's more of like a team up situation where we need like all three of our other main cast members to come and rescue her, would be like my ideal. Because as we know, much like Clyde, I love a good team up. So
Yeah, I gotta agree with you a bit, Mariah. I love what they did with Mariner, and at the end of the episode, I was at that point, I knew I'm all in on Mariner, right? Like, that's your leader. She's the one. Like, she's the boss. Before that, I was, Mike, to your point, I did think this was gonna go traditional, where She gets them into trouble. They're going like she gets them 90% of the way before getting them into a sticky situation that then only the rule book is going to get you out of.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was going to thought, but I was
Right.
really happy that they didn't go that way.
Yeah.
The only downside is it is now propped Mariner up to me as the star, right?
Oh, yeah.
Hands down. There's it's not an ensemble anymore. This is the Mariner show. That's the only thing until they flip it and everybody gets a little taste of that throne. So we'll see.
Sardonyx in the chat says the thing is, Mariner would actually be a great commander in terms of people development. I agree with that, unless you are a kind of non-corporeal beam of light that happens upon the ship.
Oh
Because
yeah,
she will
that
fuck you
cold
up.
open.
I loved it. I watched it 3 times.
I think we're gonna see that little speck come back though, because it never fully left.
Yeah.
But I thought that was like a very funny scene.
That was really funny, and I don't want to be one of these people, but like the old Star Trek head that I can be was like, what she's doing to this entity does not line up with the way a Starfleet officer would act, you know. But it
Right.
was really funny, and it's fine.
Well, I think in hindsight, right? If you think about all the times, especially on TNG and even TOS, that they would encounter some being that wasn't like misunderstood, that wasn't, confused, but was actually, just terrible, right? It was going to go bad. They always spent way too much time trying to negotiate and diplomatic, then only to now trying to get rid of this entity. I think what we got was this tongue-in-cheek rewriting of history is, oh, no, we've been down this road before. If I had a do-over,
Yeah.
here's what I would do,
Yeah.
and then throw some comedy on it. Like,
Yeah, she's like, I saw that episode of TNG. Shit did not go well.
did not.
And Paul Gregory says it was self-defense.
Yes.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
It was like weird to just watch it poop out a tricorder though, right? Like
Yeah, and that was a cool looking tricorder. Like,
yeah.
like our
I
buddy
want a
Nathan
purple
Bliss.
tricorder.
Yeah, like our buddy Nate Bliss in the chat. He says, I hope the purple striped tricorder makes a reappearance. Yes, because it needs to be in the show so much that they make a toy out of it.
Yes, please.
So I can buy it and put it on my shelf.
Yeah, I'm with Nate on that one.
Make it happen.
I'm into it. I did see Phil R commented, we're 30 minutes in and Mariah hasn't mentioned the Janeway protocol yet. I think I've figured out the Janeway protocol. If we're going to get into some of the many, many layered references in this show. But what I think it is during, there is the episode where there's that crazy, like CGI'd alien that can kill the Borgs. From Voyager. Do you remember this? We watched it, Mike.
Oh, species 8675309 Jenny.
And
Yes.
so they needed to close that portal to stop them from coming back in, right? And so what they did was it was a temporal rift, and they used a chrono deflector, which produced a tachyon pulse, which they directed at the Delta Quadrant. And it closed it. They've also, temporal rifts happen a lot in Voyager. It's also how they got to where they are in the first place, like stuck in the Delta Quadrant. So anyway, yeah, I think it has to do with the chrono deflector tachyon pulse would be my guess.
Right on. P.W. Gregory does not agree. He says the Janeway protocol is trapping your crew 70 light years from home.
That could also.
And picking up a Borg along the way. You gotta have that if you're gonna be Janeway.
Oh my gosh, the smorgasbord. That was,
dude. Okay,
chef's kiss. So good.
Let's talk about funniest scenes. I know this whole thing is hilarious, but for me, the funniest scene was Rutherford using the Janeway protocol in the command simulation, where he ejects all the children of the ship because there's so many fucking children on these starships for some reason. There's families,
kindergarten's gone,
schools, colleges. Yeah, they And yeah, that was great. I love Rutherford interacting with the with all the command crew. Well, it was the Bajoran security officer, and then the number one, right? I don't remember all their names, but the simulation stuff was really really funny. That was my favorite scene. A close second was also a Rutherford scene, in which he realizes that his implant can turn him into a Borg Terminator.
Hmm.
I love the smorgasbord scene, and I agree that's a great name for a training program. Um, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I also love the when we go back to the cold open and the I guess the entity is tiny and then kind of goes into Captain Freeman's like uniform. I love that on a number of reasons. One, the fact that she's trying to come up with a catchphrase, which I think is one of the hardest things to do in the Trek universe, right? Like,
Warp it up.
yeah, yes, it's warp time. Um, like what you've got once you move away from engage, everything else just doesn't really work.
Dude,
So,
hit it is the best.
so
Pike saying hit it works.
I
I know
feel
you don't
like
like it.
no. I feel like it works when he says it. I just don't know if it works when I say it. So
I thought you could say when I say it because I know it doesn't
no.
work when I say it.
So I like that. And then I also thought that the whole idea of that tiny dot spore like creature moving into the uniform kind of took me back to Discovery and the spore landing on Tilly and then coming back later on. So I'm like, oh, are we gonna get this as a throwback kind of much later on or just next week? So I kind
Yeah,
of I
I
dug
like
that.
I love that these are standalone episodes, but they're seeding things like that that it feels like we'll definitely see crop up later in a longer thread.
Yeah, and it was like shouting at her as it was like, "Stop, you being! I shall murder you!" Pew, boop. And then the like little puff. It was
Yep.
good sound design.
Did you have a favorite funny scene or funniest scene, Mariah?
I really like when Mariner gets on top of the bar and it's just like, "Hey, you aliens! Instead of fighting, the next 5 rounds is on me." And I was like, I mean, it's an accurate way to stop a bar fight. Like, it's just to be like, "Hey, everyone, we gotta chill." And then I also loved when Boimler was getting romanced by
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
crazy snake lady, who I can't remember what her.
I want to say that was a new alien, right?
I think it was as well, because I think
It
I tried looking it up and I
mhm.
I couldn't find very
Like
much.
in
I mean
terms
it
of like TV and movie canon, I think it
Yeah,
was a new alien.
I mean, depends on the movie because it looked a lot like Jurassic Park to
I
me
mean
with
that
the
too.
little.
Clever girl.
Um, yeah, I loved that whole sequence of him just being like, "Oh no, this is bad." And then like you could almost see like hear him hearing Mariner being like, "You just gotta loosen up and live life, man." And he's like, "All right, I'm gonna do it with this hot babe." And then she wants to just lay eggs in his throat. And then she gets sprayed with a hose, which I
Yeah,
think the
just a
hose was like
hose.
the
Yeah.
it's like if you've ever had like an animal in your yard that you don't want there and you just like kind of spray the hose at it. You're like, "You gotta leave. Get out of here."
That's what I love about Mariner. Like she is so experienced and so knowledgeable about everything in the galaxy that she just cuts straight through the easiest practical thing that's going to resolve the situation. So she's like, I don't have to use my Starfleet training, my combat training on this succubus or whatever it is. There's a hose.
Mhm.
That'll get the job done.
And then just like all of the other, because you could tell that that alien was trying to blend in with like the other species that were hanging out in that neighborhood, because they're all like sort of scantily clad, beautiful, people all there to get their jamaron on, or however you pronounced
Yes,
it.
the Jamaharan. So
Jamaharon.
what do you
Yeah.
all think the Jamaharan is specifically as possible? Answer the question.
So it was
Draw
listed and
pictures.
I read to me as Clyde's going to just turn his camera off. It was read to
Clyde, are
me
you
as being.
reenacting Jama Haron on your
I
own?
am not. I am not. That's a Grant thing.
It is a sexual encounter, but it's supposed to have like elements of like spiritual, emotional connection. That
It's a
big,
Ryza thing.
yeah, Ryza thing. The big statue in the middle is like a fertility symbol from Ryza. You know, they're all just there. It's like the harem section of the planet. You know.
And I love that that's another DS9 reference on this show because the Jama Haron was uniquely referenced in DS9 when Worf and Jadzia Dax and Quark go to Ryzen. And Worf and Jadzia Dax go to, I think they're celebrating their honeymoon or just like a getaway. And Quark just goes to fuck randos, and it's great. Speaking of Quark, there was a Ferengi in this episode, Mariner's little buddy.
Wait, Mike, I mean, I think you may have found the episode that you can give to Grant that he might actually watch DS9, so.
I don't know if the idea of like Quark doing the Jama Haron is going to do it for Grant.
Probably not.
I did read though, apparently I haven't been to enough cons. Apparently if you wear like the badge of that like fertility like vase symbol thing at cons, it means you're like DTF at the con.
Oh man.
Yes, exactly.
You know, don't make it hard on us hardcore nerds, okay? Just don't.
Why is this hard? This was written in the canon long ago.
I'm just saying, it's like it's one thing to look, I like the novels, I get into track, but
who's making what hard? Moving on. There was a Ferengi in this episode, Mariner's little buddy. Boimler was super racist to that Ferengi. Like, and Mariner knows better because later on she's talking to him and he's like, yeah, I played the stereotypical Ferengi. I think that not only was that funny, but it highlighted like her practical experience over his stupid, stodgy old book learning. Because he, with his studying, you're really just getting someone else's point of view and the broad spectrum of things. Like, and it can boil people down or whole species down to stereotypes, like the Star Trek often does with the Ferengi. But if you've seen the better Star Trek episodes, DS9,
there's nice Ferengi in Voyager.
are there?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's trustworthy Ferengi.
But in every episode, there's deep, interesting Ferengi in DS9. So we know, as Star Trek fans, that Ferengi are a much richer culture and a much more progressive culture than they seem on the surface. And I thought that was a great nod to that. And also just a nod to the idea that Boimler doesn't know what the hell he's doing when he's interacting with these other species.
I think we've broken Clyde.
No, I'm not broken. Just contemplating. I mean, it is interesting, and I'm gonna miss it, but I think it was, and I'm gonna mess this up. It's like I want to call him WYSIWYG.
It is WYSIWYG.
WYSIWYG mentioned that the Star Trek that we know often forces us to think. And challenges our thoughts. So I'm looking at this, in particular that interaction, and just wondering, is this causing or prompting us to really think about the stereotypes that we hold, right? Could this be the moment in a show like Lower Decks that is short, so it's not a whole lot of time to build, and we're laughing a lot, but is this a moment that challenges our thought? And I think you're right. I think the way he's looking at the Ferengi and talking about their beady eyes, and he was doing the whole hand thing, like that was pretty harsh for someone who wants to be in command. And so it was just interesting to me, and wondering if kind of thinking about what it might mean deeper for the rest of the show.
Yeah, and Sardonyx in the chat is articulating what I was trying to say earlier. Boimler has the biased textbook viewpoint.
We all know textbooks are very problematic.
Yeah, she has the biased Texas textbook viewpoint because our textbooks are trash. And And yeah, it's just a picture of someone who doesn't have the experience of meeting his neighbors or people outside of his own neighborhood. And I think we're seeing the problems of that come to a head in our community uh, right now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't live in the Star Trek timeline.
And I think I think that might have been the reason we didn't get that redemption moment for Boimler is maybe this is like you were saying, Clyde, we only have 25 minutes to try to punch in a bunch of jokes, give us some plot, and then maybe give us a morality lesson at the end of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think throughout the whole thing, we saw the way it could just be the idea that it is important to experience cultures outside of your own in order to be a better person, which is
Right.
what we see with Mariner. Even when they're getting the worm noodles, like Boimler acts like everything is disgusting and he doesn't like it there. And there's like a comment about the smell of the neighborhood, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then we get to all of these other small iterations where he thinks he knows best because he's read how to interact with people rather than just interacting with people. And so Mariner fully drinks all the blood wine. She does like all of the things in order to fully experience these cultural moments. And even her commenting like, oh, me and Corinne are blood blood bonded. It would be weird for me to be so formal with him. And it's like all of these smaller, nuanced moments.
And I love that she went to go blood pee out the blood wine
Yes.
You
because
know,
that sounds appropriate.
it's so interesting to me because when I think back on that scene and I think back to how Star Trek treats Klingons pretty much in almost every show, right? You have a couple that if they're in Starfleet, right? So if they look like you and dress like you and they wear your uniform, then they're okay. But if they're traditional Klingon, then when they walk onto a Star Trek ship, there's almost like this holding of the breath and this uneasiness and I'm not sure and are we safe, right? Which is interesting now that you start to think about it. But what we get in this episode is you've got Boimler who is very formal and is approaching this Klingon, Corinne with this formality that we've seen in every other track. But Mariner is just like sees him and jumps on him and they're like it is not only is it informal, it's familial, right?
Yeah.
And I'm hard pressed to think have I ever seen a human embrace a Klingon like that in any other track.
I can tell you that I have. And can you guess which show it was on?
Deep Space
Drum
Nine.
roll, please.
It's a little show called Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and the character was Jadzia Dax. And
Yes.
Mariner does have a lot of the qualities that Jadzia Dax had. Jadzia Dax obviously was a Trill who benefited from experiencing several lives worth of experience. So she had what Mariner has. She treated people like people. She had the street smarts or the space smarts, and was very open and accepting, and did exactly what Boimler does not do here. Treat people like people. He treats them like objects, right? And he treats them like you said, Clyde. There is no familiarity there. There is no there's no warmth, and it's comes off as cold, and it comes off as that that kind of dark side of Starfleet that we often mention on this show. That just really cold, one-sided, uh, uncomplicated version of Starfleet that doesn't involve a lot of diversity. That some of the um, aliens who are not part of the Federation often complain about on Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, I think any version of the
Homogenized.
Federation can be sort of compared to, sort of like what the United Nations tries to be in some sense. And like you see, it can be problematic on all sorts of fronts, from the fact that there's only like 3 official languages that are spoken within the United Nations, and otherwise you have to have translators. We don't have universal translators yet. And uh who gets to be on what councils and all of that sort of stuff. And so I think it's like an interesting parallel that we can also see that happens in Trek. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, what are you guys most looking forward to this coming season? I obviously more Mariner, less Boimler, or maybe a different Boimler. But I think we haven't seen. It's only episode 2, but we haven't seen a lot of Tendi, so I'm looking forward to a great Tendi story, because Tendi was a character who, just a great looking character, a funny character, and I find her enthusiasm just I love watching an enthusiastic character like that. And she was pitched as a character who is the Star Trek fan in the Star Trek show. So I want to see how the show kind of subverts our expectations of that and where that goes. And what are you guys looking forward to in the next few weeks on this show?
I think for me, it's character development. Right now, I'm really happy with where they're taking Mariner. I'm also really interested in see what happens with Rutherford, and what happens with Tendi, and what happens with Rutherford and Tendi. If they've kind of got a will they won't they vibe going. I just don't want that to be the only thing that we see from them. And we talk often, or we have talked often, about the fact that we're dealing with kind of the team that brought us, or parts of the team that brought us, Rick and Morty. And what I remember about Rick and Morty is early on, it was really Rick and Morty, right? And we didn't get a whole lot of the other characters. And then we started getting a lot of the other characters. I want more of that faster. Like, I really do want to see, I want to see what the arc for Rutherford looks like, what the arc for Tendi looks like, what the arc for Boimler looks like, and maybe even a little bit about some more interactions with some of the command crew. Because I think it's interesting when you see the ensigns interact with the command crew, and that dynamic, right? Almost like a mentor-mentee relationship, positive and negative. But I'm interested in seeing that. So,
Yeah, Nate Bliss in our chat again is kind of echoing what you're saying. He wants to see the show mix it up a little bit. He says, I'm interested in seeing things get a little shook up as far as the pairings are concerned. So far, we've basically seen Mariner, Boimler, and Tendi Rutherford bits. And yeah, and it's only 2 episodes, but I am itching to see Mariner hang out a little more with Tendi, like we saw in the cold open here, and Mariner hang out with Rutherford, and maybe Boimler stays in his bed. I was going to say in his room, but they don't have rooms.
Yeah, I agree with y'all. I'm looking forward to seeing how this cast sort of gets to come together. I hope we get to see some more adventures, maybe with all 4 of them participating, just because I think that's always fun for away missions when you get all of your main characters down doing the same thing. And then, maybe then the B plot is like the bridge crew for an episode. That could be really fun. And I'm just excited to continue seeing. They've had like a great slot of guest voices. Like I know Paul Scheer was a guest voice on this one. I think he's going to be on almost every episode as well. But
he's recurring, yeah.
I've been having fun seeing who's popping up and how all these characters are progressing. I think again, it's hard to really speculate on what we're really going to see because we are only 2 episodes in. It's a completely new format as far as like an animated, shorter version of this show, but I have a feeling the jokes are going to continue to get more layered and will continue to be really fun. I have heard from some journalists who've gotten like 4 episodes available to them, rather than us having to go one by one, saying that the pace slows down a little bit, which I do think will be helpful in helping to get us more character development and less just like fast paced comedy. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to some of those maybe slower paced episodes.
I did feel the pace settle a little more in this episode compared to the pilot for sure.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Anything else you want to say about this episode? I know we probably only covered the surface of it. I'm definitely going to watch it again. Maybe we'll chat a little more about it on a Patreon episode coming up. And I know the chat has been going off about different pieces of the episode. But thank you so much for joining us on the pod this week. Do you guys have anything else to say about the episode before we?
Yeah, shoes. Did you check out the Starfleet shoes?
No, did they had like
Mm.
sneakers like on Discovery?
So if you see, I think in one of the scenes, the early scenes where Mariner has her feet up, the bottom of her shoes have like a Starfleet logo on them.
Oh, that's cool.
So I was like, wow, we've never really thought about what's on their feet or what shoes look like. But yeah, they're kind of like a Starfleet branded UGG almost.
Nice. Okay, I want those shoes. I want the purple lace tricorder,
Hmm.
and I want that uniform. I
The
love
dress
that.
one, you like the long with the
Yeah,
long one?
well, no, not the
Not the
dress
tunic
uniform,
dress.
not the tunic dress, but I like that it's a tunic that it's a mix of the TNG uniform and um, the TOS crew movie uniform, where they can just kind of open up the tunic. I love that. All right. Thank you so much for joining us on the pod this week. Remember, you can find us live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook every Thursday, talking Trek, and of course, covering Lower Decks every single week. Go to StarTrekPod.co to subscribe.
Also, if you have not heard enough from all of us yet this week, make sure you go and check out our Patreon. There is a back catalog of Mike and I talking about our Badass Women of Trek series. There's a best of 7 of 9. We've been delving into the Kelvin universe of movies, so you can hear us talk about the best Chris Pine, and also hang out in our Slack for just $2 an episode. So make sure you check us out on Patreon.
Yes, and I just want to remind you one more time, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow us at Star Trek Pod. Tweet out about the episode. Tell people that you love us. Share the love. And also, as always, I want to shout out 2 people who help us. We couldn't do it without you. Karen, who runs our Twitter, and James Worm, the man behind our Insta. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Clyde, where can we follow you online?
You can
And
follow
hear
me
more from you.
at Clyde Haynes on Twitter, and then you can hit me on the web, www.keyandclyde.com. That's KEI and Clyde.com.
What about Mariah?
I'm at Mariah Gossett on all social platforms. That's Mariah with a Y and a Gossett with 2 S's and 2 T's.
Follow me on Twitter at Mike M. Garcia. Come back to watch the live pod next Thursday at 9 p.m. Central. Live long and prosper.
Bye.
It's warp time.